What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so before I get into this video, shout out to the man, the myth, the legend, the brother Robert Basin coming through with yet another donation to the channel via the PayPal. Salute to you for showing love once again to this channel. And I want to give a quick message to those of you who have been signed to my Patreon. I know some of you guys have been trying to contact me. For the time being, I've been having some technical issues with the Patreon, with the one that I had. So I will more than likely be creating another one. So you have not been billed. And as of right now, that Patreon is not active. Some internal things are going on. So I will have to create another one. It'll be later on this month. So if you've been messaging me, I'm unable to reply on the Patreon. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but you have not been billed since October. So just let you guys know. That's the reason why I haven't been able to reply to messages, because I'm having technical issues with the Patreon. But this is something I want to talk about. We've been going in on Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers, Steve Ballmer and the Clippers, and rightfully so, especially Ticket TV. All right, Ticket been going in on them rightfully. Kawhi Leonard should not be in the Hall of Fame. In my opinion, Kawhi Leonard is even worse than Pete Rose. I think he's a fraud. Okay, because at least Pete Rose never cheated the game itself. He played as hard as possible. He played more games than anybody else in the history of Major League Baseball, and you never questioned his effort when he was playing. But I do think there's a party that gets away without getting his fair share of criticism. Okay? Now, like I said, we criticize Kawhi Leonard, and rightfully so, and Steve Ballmer, the owner, right? With the shenanigans, with the under-the-table payments, apparently this seems to be true. But DeMarcus Cousins said something about an individual recently who he felt should be getting more of the blame. He said, quote, "When you think about the guys involved, you think about the coach. He's a champion." It's Tyronn Lue. When you think about the franchise guy, he's a champion. Kawhi Leonard. And then you look at this one dynamic in the scenario, someone who's never done anything in any position he's been in that has produced winning or championships. But he's the decision maker, and he continues to change this team around every single year, and they get worse and worse. He tries to coach from behind the scenes, kind of hides his hands in those types of situations. It's Lawrence Frank. And I don't know how many more seasons we have to go through before we start looking at this guy as the issue. It doesn't go any further than him. I think a lot of things would be different if he wasn't at the head of the realm. Now, I think Kawhi Leonard is part of the problem, obviously, because he's now on the court participating. He's not available, and he's taking millions and millions and millions of dollars that could be going to another player, and he's playing part-time basketball, right? But I do think that this is a point that should be brought about Lawrence Frank, because you look at it like you look at his resume, and you have to ask yourself, how exactly did he get this position? How did he get this position? Because I'm looking at his resume. They start off as a coach at Marquette University when he was in his early 20s, right? Then from 1992 to 1994, he was an assistant coach with Marquette. Then from 1994 to 1997, he was an assistant coach with the Tennessee Volunteers basketball team. Then from 1997 to 2000, He was an assistant coach. He moved to the NBA. He was assistant coach with the Vancouver Grizzlies. I can't remember who the hell the head coach was back then. Then, from 2000 to 2004, he was an assistant coach with the New Jersey Nets. Now, I know at least toward the end of that tenure, if not the entire tenure, the head coach, I think it was toward the end of that tenure, though, or halfway through, whatever. The coach was Byron Scott, if I'm not mistaken, right? Former NBA player, the Lakers. I think he also played for the Grizzlies and the Pacers. Then, during the 2003-2004 season, now remember, under Byron Scott, the Nets went to back-to-back finals. But early in the 2003-2004 season, after a bad start, Byron Scott was fired. Lawrence Frank was hired as the head coach. They went 25-15 in the 40 games he coached. And in the playoffs, they lost to the semifinals. In the semifinals to the eventual champion Detroit Pistons. That's not a bad run, right? You go 25-15 in your first 40 games coaching. And this is a team that a year earlier, they went to the NBA Finals. You lose in the semis to the Pistons. That's not that bad because they won a championship there, the Pistons, right? But then the next year, the Nets go 49-33, and they lose in the semis to the Heat. Now, that's a good record, but it's kind of redundant that you can't get out of the second round, right? But at least you're winning almost 50 games. Then the next year, 2006-2007, they go 41-41 on the Lawrence Frank. They lose in the semis to the Cavaliers. Then the next year, 2007-2008, they go 34-38 and miss the playoffs. 2008-2009, 34-48. They missed the playoffs. 2009-2010, Lawrence Frank, you guys might remember this. Lawrence Frank started off the season with the Nets 0-16, and he was fired. Then what happens? Well, after a year out of basketball, he then, during 2011-2012 season, becomes somehow the head coach of the Detroit Pistons. They go 25-41. And the next year with the Pistons, because that was the lockout year, the full season, they go 29-53. Missed the playoffs. Lawrence Frank, I think, is fired after that, or steps down, 1 or 2. He then becomes an assistant with the then Brooklyn Nets. Then he moves to the Clippers as an assistant under Doc Rivers, right? Doc Rivers at the time is head coach and president of basketball operations. But then in 2016, for some reason, Lawrence Frank moves up to becoming vice president of basketball operations. And then in 2017, Lawrence Frank, who hadn't won shit on any level and was mediocre to horrible as a head coach, becomes the president of basketball operations for the Clippers, essentially becoming Doc Rivers' boss, because Doc Rivers then moves to just focus on coaching. Afterwards, Lawrence Frank has one glory moment that led to him becoming the executive of the year. And that was when they signed Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, because everybody thought that was going to be the turning point for the Clippers organization. Kawhi came out with the campaign, "This is his city." Everyone thought the Clippers were going to be champions, perhaps a potential dynasty. And Lawrence Frank was executive of the year. Only for that year, for them to struggle by their standards, because they thought they was going to sweep Mavericks, to struggle in 6 games in the first round with a Luka Doncic that was, 22 years old, maybe? That averaged 31, almost 32 points a night, 9 rebounds and 9 assists against the Clippers in that first round series. And then in the semis to blow a 3-1 lead to the Denver Nuggets. Then the next year, under Lawrence Frank's leadership, remember, he's president of basketball operations, so he's more powerful than the general manager. He not only controls the roster and all of that, but he also looks over other executive aspects of the team. 2021, they lost in the Western Conference semifinals. That's when Kawhi wasn't even playing in that series. Then in 2022, they missed the playoffs completely. In 2023, they lost in the first round. In 2024, they lost in the first round. Last year, they lost in the first round. And Lawrence Frank is largely responsible for all of the boneheaded roster moves. Now, Kawhi Leonard is the one that signed off on that stuff, and he should be blamed. But Lawrence Frank is the one that signed the motherfucking paper. Lawrence Frank is the one that actually pushed the button on these shits. So he deserves some of the blame as well. He's the worst general manager in the history of sports. He doesn't deserve to be in the position he's in. And if I'm Steve Ballmer, he should be fired too. Kawhi needs to be traded. Steve Ballmer needs to be penalized and perhaps lose that team. But Lawrence Frank should get some of this smoke too. He's horrible. He's horrible. He's horrible. He was a horrible coach. He was a horrible executive. But he escapes criticism because he's always behind the scenes. There's always others who catch all the smoke. So when you got, this scam artist in Kawhi Leonard, and you got players who are noted for being choke artists, players who, don't have the intestinal fortitude to lead their own teams, like Bradley Beal, who's now broken down. And you combine that with a mediocre coach in Tyronn Lue, a sneaky one at that, and you combine that with an owner who's unscrupulous, and then you combine that with a general manager or president of basketball operations, a guy like Lawrence Frank, who's incompetent, then yes, the Clippers are going to be a shit show. Man, that's all I got to say about it. Tell me what you guys think.